At Christmas, she signs the divorce papers in tears, unaware she is pregnant and billionaire. The letter said $10,000. If it wasn't paid by Christmas, Jessica would lose more than her home. Her hands trembled as she clutched the crisp envelope, the numbers glaring up at her like a verdict. Her mother, Emily, sat across from her in their tiny, drafty apartment, wringing her hands until the skin turned white. The heater rattled uselessly in the corner, barely keeping out the December chill, while the wind whistled through the cracked window. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? I don't know how we'll manage, Jessica, Emily whispered, her voice cracking. We've borrowed from everyone. There's no one left. Jessica swallowed hard, the lump in her throat threatening to choke her. Her small, sickly frame shook with the weight of helplessness. Weeks of illness had left her fragile, drained, and entirely dependent on her mother. And now the looming debt had brought the Ashfords into their lives, an unstoppable force of wealth and cruelty. A knock at the door cut through the quiet like a knife. Emily hesitated, but there was no choice. She opened it. Olivia Ashford stepped in, sharp heels clicking against the floor, her perfectly tailored coat dusting the edge of the room. Behind her, tall and imposing, was James Ashford, her son. His blue eyes were cold, calculating, and his lips curved in a faint, mocking smile. "Emily," Olivia said smoothly, scanning Jessica with a predator's gaze. "We've been patient, but patience has limits." Emily swallowed. We can't repay." Olivia cut her off. "Then we must settle this another way." Her eyes locked on Jessica, icy and unyielding. "James, you understand what needs to happen." Jessica's stomach dropped. The rumor she had heard about the Ashfords' cruelty now pressed down on her chest. What do you mean?" James stepped closer, the shadow of his presence suffocating. "Jessica," he said, each word deliberate, measured, "your family owes my family $10,000. Since it hasn't been repaid, we've decided on a permanent solution." Emily gasped. Jessica's knees went weak. "Permanent solution?" Olivia's thin smile widened. "You will marry James tonight. The contract is already prepared. Refuse, and your mother's debt doubles by morning." Jessica's hand shook. I would rather beg on the streets than sell myself," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but in it was the spark of resistance, a flicker of self-respect. Olivia's gaze hardened. "It's settled. There is no other choice." The next 3 weeks were a nightmare stitched together from humiliation and despair. James barely spoke to her, yet every glance, every smirk was a reminder of her inferiority. Olivia never missed a chance to demean her, often in front of guests, making her feel smaller every passing day. The apartment she once called home became a distant memory, replaced by gilded cages and suffocating expectations. Then came the Christmas party, the pinnacle of her torment. The Ashford mansion glittered with lights, laughter, and the scent of expensive wine. Jessica, dressed in a gown that felt like armor against the cold, moved through the crowd like a ghost. Every smile was forced, every word hollow. Olivia, of course, had plans. In front of the assembled guests, she deliberately tripped Jessica, sending her sprawling across the polished marble floor. Gasps echoed, but Olivia's laughter was louder, sharper, slicing through the festive cheer. James stood nearby, smirking, his hand resting lightly on the arm of another guest. "You should thank my mother," he said casually. The cruelty in his tone masked his civility. Jessica's cheeks burned with shame, tears threatening to spill. Before she could recover, James tossed a folder across the floor. Divorce papers. "Sign these," he said, voice icy, cutting through the music and chatter. 3 weeks after the forced wedding, Jessica's life had unraveled. Her hand shook violently as she signed the papers, not out of agreement, but out of survival. James shoved her toward the door and she stumbled into the cold night, the papers clutched to her chest, her sobs swallowed by the indifferent winter air. She sank to her knees in the snow, shivering, humiliated and defeated. Every ounce of hope seemed gone. Until her phone rang, an unknown number flashed across the screen. Hesitant, trembling, she answered. "Jessica," a voice whispered, frail yet unmistakable. "It's me, Daniel, your father. I don't have much time left. I want to see you, just one last time." Her heart stopped. Daniel, her father, whom she had never met, never spoken to, was alive, and he wanted her. The idea seemed impossible, yet it ignited a spark inside her chest. She sent her location immediately. Within minutes, a sleek black car arrived. Jessica, still clutching the signed divorce papers, stepped in, her pulse racing. She had no idea that by sunrise, her life would never be the same, and that the man she was about to meet was not just her father, but someone even the Ashfords feared. That night, as the car disappeared into the snowy streets, Jessica had no idea that everything she had lost and everything she thought she could never have was about to return in a way more powerful, dangerous, and life-changing than she could ever imagine. The hospital's sliding doors hissed open, and Jessica stepped inside, clutching the signed divorce papers like a talisman against the cold dread creeping through her chest. The polished floors gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights, sterile and unwelcoming. A nurse glanced at her, then quickly lowered her eyes, whispering to someone on the phone, "She's here." Jessica froze. The faint echo of the word Ashford traveled down the hallway, and a shiver ran through her. The corridor felt narrower, the air heavier, as if invisible eyes were watching her every move. Security guards near the reception desk exchanged silent glances, their posture stiff. She felt like she was stepping into a trap, yet her feet carried her forward. "Miss Jessica?" The nurse's voice quivered slightly. You need to wait here for Mr. Daniel. He's not well." Jessica's heart pounded. Not well could mean anything. She had imagined this reunion 1,000 times, and none of those imagined moments included danger or hesitation. But something about the way the staff glanced over their shoulders, the hushed tones, the tension in the air, told her this was no ordinary visit. A moment later, the door to the private room opened, and a weak but deliberate voice called her name. "Jessica, my daughter." She turned, and the sight of him took her breath away. Frail, lying in a hospital bed with tubes and wires trailing from his body, Daniel looked nothing like the powerful figure she had imagined, and yet there was an undeniable fire in his eyes as they locked on hers. Recognition, longing, and 1,000 unspoken words seemed to pour from him in that single gaze. Jessica stepped forward cautiously, unsure if she was allowed to approach. The air around him felt charged, almost fragile, like the calm before a storm. "Dad," she whispered, barely audible. I didn't even know where to begin." Daniel reached out a trembling hand. "It's enough that you're here," he said, his voice low but urgent. "After all these years, I've waited just to see you, even for a moment." Jessica's chest tightened. But why now? Why never before? Daniel's frail form shifted, a flash of anger in his eyes. "Because, Jessica, the world is cruel. There were people who wanted to take everything from me. Everything, including you. I had to protect you, even if it meant staying away." She felt the weight of his words pressing down on her, but still, questions burned in her mind. Protect me from who? He hesitated, glancing toward the window, toward the city beyond. Dangerous people. People who would have seen you hurt. You don't understand yet,
but some things are better learned slowly. Jessica's stomach churned. There was no simple explanation, no fairy tale reunion, only fragments of truth, whispered and withheld, as if the world outside was ready to pounce on them the moment they faltered. Daniel's hand tightened slightly on hers. "You are stronger than you think, and soon you'll need that strength." "Strength? For what?" she asked, her voice small. His eyes glinted faintly, almost mischievously despite the pain. "For the world that will come for you, for the life you never knew you could have. I've built things, Jessica, things you'll see soon. But that comes later. Right now, just know this, you are not alone." Jessica blinked back tears, unsure if they were of relief or fear. Every nerve in her body was on edge, every instinct screaming that the world she had escaped, the world of the Ashfords, humiliation and loss, was still very much alive, hovering in the shadows. Hours passed in quiet conversation, punctuated by silence and careful glances. Daniel spoke little of his empire, hinting instead at unseen power. A board meeting interrupted by his phone, voices respectful yet tense. A nurse whispering in his ear about people waiting outside for him. His jaw tightening at the mere mention of a name, Ashford. Jessica began to understand. This wasn't just a reunion. This was stepping into a web of influence, danger, and secrets far larger than she had imagined. By the time the night deepened, exhaustion claimed her, and she leaned back against the hospital chair. Her pulse still raced, not from relief, but from the thrill and fear of standing on the edge of something monumental. She was a daughter reunited, yet she was also a girl about to inherit a world she didn't fully understand, one full of threats and unimaginable responsibility. And then, a sharp jolt of dizziness made her sway. She clutched the armrest, her vision blurring. A faint, queasy nausea crept through her, subtle but unmistakable. Daniel noticed immediately, his eyes narrowing in concern. "You're weak," he murmured, and Jessica felt a pang of worry she didn't understand. Not now, she thought. She couldn't process that. Not tonight. Outside, the hospital window reflected the snow-draped city, silent and white. Jessica stood there, looking out, still trembling, still uncertain, and yet she felt something stirring inside, a hint of power, a whisper of destiny. Jessica didn't know that the Ashfords were already tightening their grip on the world she had just escaped, and she didn't know that one small, seemingly ordinary decision tonight would soon pull her back into their orbit. And the danger waiting outside these walls was far from over.
The hospital was quiet, too quiet, until the sudden beep of Daniel's phone shattered the fragile calm. Jessica jumped, clutching the armrest. The nurse flinched, exchanging a worried glance with a security guard. "The security alert came at 2:14 a.m., the guard whispered. "Ashford Enterprises, they've just crossed a line." Jessica froze, her pulse hammered in her ears. The Ashfords? After everything, they were moving again? Already? And in secret? Daniel's pale face tightened, his hand gripping the sheets. "They're acquiring Black Ridge Logistics," Daniel said, voice low but sharp. "The artery of our supply chain. If they succeed, it will cripple half of what I've built." Jessica's stomach dropped. "And we can't stop them?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "We can, but it will require action and quick thinking. Nothing is handed to you in this world. You have to fight for it." The weight of the situation pressed down on her. All her life she had been powerless, humiliated, discarded, and ignored. Now, for the first time, the universe demanded she act. A lawyer stepped into the room, whispering urgently, "Sir, their legal maneuvering is faster than expected. If we don't respond by morning, Black Ridge will be lost. Daniel coughed, the weak hack rattling his chest. Blood spattered on the white sheets. Jessica's heart lurched. Fear, anger, and determination collided inside her. Not this time. Not me. She took a shaky breath. Teach me. Not tomorrow. Now. Daniel blinked, surprise flashing in his eyes. You want to start tonight? Yes, she said firmly, though her voice trembled. I can't just sit here while they take everything. Daniel smiled faintly, pride mixing with exhaustion. Good. That's the beginning of strength. The next hours were chaotic. Daniel guided her through the complex web of his empire, not by overwhelming her with wealth, but by showing her influence. Security protocols, supply chains, hidden stakes and deals, and subtle manipulations of powerful people. Jessica listened, questioned, and, most importantly, made one small decision of her own: to authorize a protective hold on Black Ridge. It was minor, a test, but a start. The lawyers nodded, impressed. Even as she acted, subtle waves of weakness hit her. Dizziness, nausea, fainting moments she couldn't explain. Jessica ignored them, her mind focused on the immediate threat. This is bigger than me, bigger than my fear. Outside, the Ashfords' shadow loomed silently. News tickers whispered about their latest acquisition. Phones buzzed with corporate alerts. In the hospital room, the faint tension of unseen eyes reminded Jessica that danger was never far away. The enemy hadn't vanished. They were watching, moving, waiting. Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts. Remember this, Jessica. Power is meaningless without courage, and courage is meaningless without action. The Ashfords think they can corner you because they've seen you fall before. They are wrong. Jessica swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. She was no longer a passive girl who cried at humiliation. She was standing on the threshold of her first real test. One decision, one move, one small action, and she could begin to take back control of her life. Hours slipped by. The hospital clock ticked relentlessly, each second carrying the potential for disaster. Jessica's mind raced. Every strategy Daniel showed her, every warning he whispered, felt like stepping onto a battlefield, and she was ready, trembling though she was. Finally, Daniel leaned back, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. Rest now, Jessica. You've done enough for one night. She nodded, but her eyes stayed fixed on the dark city beyond the window. Somewhere out there, the Ashfords were plotting, already moving to undo everything. She could feel it, like a pulse in the air, and she knew that come morning, she would face a decision that could throw her back into James Ashford's orbit, whether she liked it or not. The nausea flared again, faint but persistent. She pressed her hand to her stomach, ignoring it, though her body whispered a secret she didn't yet understand. Snow fell silently outside, blanketing the city in deceptive calm. Jessica sat upright, her mind alive with strategy and determination. For the first time in her life, she realized she would not just survive, she would fight, she would learn, and she would never again be powerless. By morning, Jessica would be forced to sign a document she didn't fully understand, and that single choice would draw her straight back into James Ashford's world, where the stakes are higher, the danger closer, and the cost far greater than she had ever imagined.
Dawn had barely broken when Jessica stirred awake, the pale light slicing through the hospital blinds. Her body ached, but it wasn't just fatigue. It was the weight of last night's choices pressing down on her. Her father's cough from earlier echoed in her mind, faint but jagged, a reminder that every second counted. Daniel shifted in his bed, blood streaking the corner of his mouth. "Jessica," he rasped, eyes locking on hers. "If the Ashfords' deal succeeds, if Black Ridge falls, I won't survive the fallout." Jessica's stomach twisted. Suddenly, this wasn't just strategy, it was life and death. Every decision she made carried consequences not only for the Empire, but for her father's fragile life. I understand," she said, trying to steady her shaking hands. "Teach me. Not tomorrow. Now." Daniel studied her, a flicker of pride in his tired eyes. "Very well. You'll start with something small but meaningful." By mid-morning, they were in the private study, lined with towering shelves of ledgers, contracts, and folders with a faint scent of leather and ink. Daniel began her training, not with abstract lectures, but with immediate action and risk. "Power," he said, "is not wealth, it's knowledge, timing, leverage, and sometimes a single signature can change everything." He handed her a stack of contracts related to Blackridge Logistics. Jessica scanned the documents, her pulse quickening. The Ashfords' lawyers were rumored to be monitoring the filing in real time. One wrong move, and they could exploit it. Her first mistake came almost immediately. A clause she misread could have allowed the Ashfords to claim part of the holdings. The lawyer paused, eyebrow raised. "Are you certain about this?" Jessica's hands trembled, but she nodded. "Yes, we can't delay." "Once you sign," the lawyer warned, "there's no pulling back. Every eye is on this, Ashford included." Her pulse raced as she put pen to paper. The room held its breath, and when she finally finished, a small nod from Daniel and a tense glance from the lawyer confirmed success. It was a minor victory, but earned, fragile, and real. She exhaled, relief mingling with adrenaline. Her voice rang steady as she said, "They haven't met me yet." Yet as the words left her lips, her hands shook slightly, a reminder that courage and fear can coexist. The morning pressed on, and with it came active threats from the Ashfords. News tickers flashed acquisitions and mergers, a key partner withdrew unexpectedly, and a bank delayed funds crucial to Blackridge operations. These weren't just whispers or rumors anymore. These were real, tangible consequences. The enemy was alive, moving, and watching her every decision. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Then they've underestimated me. Her body reminded her of other concerns. Dizziness flared, faint nausea pricked at her stomach, subtle but insistent. She pressed a hand there briefly, ignoring it. Focus demanded it. There would be time for everything else later. Daniel's gaze softened as he observed her. "You've done well today, but remember, Jessica, every choice comes with cost. Every decision can save or destroy. The Ashfords will push, test, and try to break you. You must act decisively, but wisely." Hours blurred in a storm of contracts, strategy, and decision-making. Jessica made small, critical choices, approving protective clauses, confirming communications, anticipating Ashford maneuvers. With each act, she felt herself changing. The powerless girl who had cried at a Christmas party was no longer there. By late afternoon, Jessica paused at the window, staring down at the snow-covered city below. She could almost feel the Ashfords' presence, stalking her from afar, waiting for a misstep. The stakes were higher than ever. Every move she made now carried weight, danger, and the potential for both victory and loss. Daniel approached, frail but steady. "By dawn tomorrow, you'll face a choice far more dangerous than signing these contracts. One decision could either protect everything we've built or bind you back to James Ashford in ways you cannot yet imagine." Jessica's jaw tightened, determination flaring in her eyes. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the faint wave of nausea returning. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. Vulnerable, human, and ready. Outside, the snow fell silently, hiding the turmoil below. Jessica exhaled, a mix of fear and resolve settling in her chest. She was learning, acting, and beginning to wield influence, but she knew deep in her bones that the real test was coming, and it would demand everything she had.
The night had fallen like a heavy curtain over the city, but Jessica couldn't sleep.
Her father's warnings, the Ashfords' moves, and the decisions she had already made churned in her mind. Every detail of the contract she had signed replayed in her thoughts. Every hesitation she had felt at the signature now felt like a prelude to war. Daniel stirred beside her, groaning as he adjusted in his hospital bed. His pale face looked even more fragile in the dim light, and Jessica's chest tightened. She could no longer afford hesitation, not for him, not for herself. "The Ashfords are moving again," Daniel said, his voice low but urgent. "They think that by tomorrow everything will be under their control. They're wrong, but we need a plan, now." Jessica drew in a deep breath. "Then let's act. I don't want to wait." Her voice carried a firmness that surprised even her. The powerless girl who had been humiliated and thrown away no longer existed. Daniel stirred her carefully, a flicker of pride in his tired eyes. "Very well. Tonight, you make your first move against them. A small strike, but enough to signal that we are not weak." Jessica followed him into the private study, where files, laptops, and financial reports were scattered across the large oak table. Daniel pointed to a highlighted section on one of the screens. "Black Ridge Logistics. They've tried to cut our funding through a partner bank. If we act fast, we can freeze their assets temporarily, just long enough to destabilize their move and make them hesitate." Jessica's pulse quickened. "And I can do this?" "Yes, but understand," Daniel cautioned. "Any mistake and they'll retaliate immediately. Every signature, every authorization carries risk. You will feel the pressure, but that pressure is your teacher." For the next several hours, Jessica worked alongside Daniel and the lawyers. Her hands shook as she inputted authorizations, confirmed filings, and executed protective clauses. Every click of the keyboard, every signature felt like a move on a battlefield. Then her first real mistake hit. She misread a clause in a secondary contract, small, but enough that a potential loophole could have allowed Ashford lawyers to exploit it. The head lawyer hesitated, frowning. "Mr. Jessica, are you certain?" Jessica's throat tightened, her heart hammering in her chest. Yes, correct it." Daniel's hand brushed hers, steadying her. "Fix it now. Don't let fear freeze you. This is the moment you prove yourself." She took a shaky breath and amended the clause. The lawyers nodded, impressed with how quickly she recovered. She felt a flicker of pride, earned, tense and fragile, but it was enough to keep her moving. Hours later, the first wave of results came in. A partner bank delayed funding, forcing Ashford's team to halt their acquisition. The news came through Daniel's phone with a subtle ping. Jessica's eyes widened. They stopped," she whispered. Daniel's weak smile held both relief and warning. "Temporarily, but you did this. This was your first real strike. And make no mistake, they will respond." Jessica allowed herself a small exhale. Her hands still trembled slightly, but her resolve had hardened. She was learning to play the game, and for the first time, she understood the taste of victory, however small. But danger was never far. Subtle nausea prickled her stomach again. She pressed a hand there, but ignored it, focusing instead on the Ashford countermove she knew was inevitable. Every success carried a shadow, and the shadows were closing in fast. Outside, the city glittered under the cold moonlight. The snow that had blanketed it now seemed fragile and temporary, easily disturbed, like the fragile advantage she had just carved out. Jessica felt the enormity of the world pressing on her shoulders, but alongside it came a fierce, growing certainty. She was no longer powerless. Daniel's eyes met hers. "Tonight, you've begun to shape your own path, but remember, power attracts enemies. You've made yourself visible, and James Ashford, he will notice." Jessica swallowed hard, feeling a mix of fear and exhilaration. Her voice was steady. "Let him. They think they can break me. They're wrong." A soft wave of dizziness passed, but she ignored it, focusing instead on the Ashford countermove she knew was inevitable.
Every success carried a shadow, and the shadows were closing in fast. By dawn, Jessica's move would force the Ashfords into action, and one misstep, one delay could drag her straight back into James' orbit, testing her courage, wit, and the power she had only just begun to wield.
The city lights glimmered below, like a battlefield map. Jessica sat at the edge of the private study, her fingers lightly tracing the contracts spread before her. Each document, each report, each email was a potential weapon or a trap. The Ashfords were clever, ruthless, and impatient, and Jessica was beginning to see just how deep their claws reached. Daniel leaned back in his chair, pale but alert, eyes scanning the monitors. "They've regrouped faster than I anticipated," he said, voice low but tense. "Ashford Enterprises has coordinated a secondary attack, this time targeting our major distribution channels. If we don't act, they could cripple Blackridge entirely within 24 hours. Jessica's heart thumped, but she squared her shoulders. The fear that had once paralyzed her was gone, replaced by sharp, strategic focus. "Then we stop them," she said firmly. "Now." Her father studied her, a flicker of pride and warning in his gaze. "This is no longer practice. Every move tonight could cost us, or you personally. One mistake, and James Ashford will know exactly where to hit next." For the next hours, Jessica was fully immersed in the counterattack. She coordinated with the lawyers, authorized emergency measures, and sent directives to secure distribution channels. Every click, every signature was a calculated move on a chessboard she was only beginning to understand. Yet the Ashfords were relentless. Alerts buzzed constantly, a partner withdrawing support, a key shipment delayed, a sudden bank freeze threatening liquidity. Each challenge forced Jessica to think faster, act sharper, and anticipate moves she couldn't yet see. Then, the moment of real danger arrived. One of the Ashfords' maneuvers almost succeeded. A contract loophole she hadn't caught could have handed them a significant advantage. A cold sweat broke across her forehead as the lawyer froze, whispering, This could undo everything." Jessica's mind raced. She could feel the weight of the empire pressing down on her, Daniel's health and future hanging in balance. Her hands trembled, and a faint nausea prickled at her stomach, a subtle reminder of something she couldn't yet name, but she pushed it aside. With razor-sharp focus, she recalculated, cross-checked, and issued a corrective authorization just in time. The lawyers nodded, impressed at her quick thinking under pressure. Daniel let out a low breath, his eyes wet with relief. "Well done, Jessica. That was excellent. You've not just protected Blackridge, you've sent a message." "A message?" Jessica exhaled, chest tight with adrenaline. "Yes," Daniel said softly, "that the Ashfords can no longer bully, underestimate, or humiliate you. You've begun to claim power, not just inherit it." Outside, the city glittered deceptively calm under the night sky, but Jessica could feel the tremors of the corporate battlefield vibrating through the streets. The Ashfords were plotting, strategizing, already reacting to her moves, and for the first time, she felt the heady mix of fear and exhilaration, knowing that her actions had consequences and that she was capable of influencing them. As the hours dragged on, Jessica allowed herself a brief pause. She leaned back in her chair, eyes scanning the reports one more time. Her hands shook slightly, confidence tempered with the memory of near failure. Daniel's voice cut through the silence. "Tonight, you've done more than learn. You've acted, and in acting, you've begun to take the first step towards reclaiming everything that was stolen from you." Jessica's gaze hardened, determination flaring. "They humiliated me, threw me away, and thought I was powerless. Tonight, they'll see the woman they tried to crush." A subtle wave of nausea passed again, faint but insistent, reminding her that not all challenges were external. She pressed her hand to her stomach, ignoring the warning for now. There would be time to face that later. Tonight, the Ashfords demanded her full attention. By morning, Jessica's first decisive moves would force James Ashford to notice her, and the Ashfords would be scrambling to counteract the woman they thought was a powerless pawn. But the next challenge would be even greater.
testing not just her strategy, but the depth of her courage, wit, and the power she had only begun to command.
The first rays of dawn barely touched the skyline, but Jessica was already awake, her eyes scanning the city from the hospital window. Last night had been a battlefield of contracts, phone calls, and calculated moves, and for the first time, she felt the intoxicating weight of control. Daniel stirred beside her, coughing softly. His pale face was a reminder of what was at stake. Every victory carried the shadow of fragility. "They're reacting faster than I thought," he murmured, eyes still on the monitors. "Ashford Enterprises is scrambling to regain lost ground, and soon they will notice you personally." Jessica's jaw tightened. She wasn't just learning strategy anymore. She was beginning to think like a commander, weighing every possible move, every reaction, every ripple her actions created. And for the first time, her mind drifted to James Ashford, not as a distant, cruel obstacle, but as a target. "He humiliated me," she whispered, voice cold but controlled. "He humiliated my family, my mother, me, and he walked away, thinking it meant nothing." Daniel's hand brushed hers gently. "And now, you have the power to ensure it means everything. But remember, revenge without strategy is reckless. You must be patient, deliberate, and invisible until the right moment." Jessica nodded. She had tasted victory, yes, but she also knew how quickly the Ashfords could retaliate. Every move she had made last night had consequences. Every decision now carried both the possibility of triumph and the threat of disaster. Her morning was consumed with strategy sessions. Daniel walked her through the broader empire, pointing out weak points, potential allies, and opportunities the Ashfords didn't anticipate. Every note, every suggestion, every detail sharpened Jessica's mind, preparing her not only for the corporate war, but the personal reckoning with James. Then came the first concrete message from the Ashfords, a subtle, veiled warning slipped through a partner bank. Funds for Blackridge were frozen for 24 hours, pending legal review. Jessica's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. "They're testing us," she said, her voice measured. "They want to see if I panic." Daniel nodded. "Exactly, and your response will teach them that you are not the girl they threw away." She spent the next hours crafting a countermeasure, a temporary reallocation of assets, a redirection of key shipments, and a discreet communication to partners confirming Blackridge's stability. Each action was calculated to frustrate the Ashfords while avoiding direct exposure. By late afternoon, the first ripple of success appeared. The Ashfords' initial moves were halted, and murmurs of confusion spread through their network. Jessica felt a surge of satisfaction, but it was tempered by awareness. This was only the beginning. Her hands brushed her stomach lightly, a subtle ache reminding her of the life she carried. The nausea persisted, faint but insistent, ignored as she focused on strategy. The duality of her reality, power and vulnerability, was a delicate balance she was learning to navigate. As dusk fell, Daniel leaned back, exhaustion written on his face. "You've done well today, Jessica. Not just in action, but in restraint. You've shown them that you are capable, patient, and dangerous when provoked. But James, he's different. His cruelty is personal, and eventually you will have to confront him directly." Jessica's lips pressed together. A cold determination settled in her chest. She remembered every humiliation, every sneer, every public disgrace he had inflicted upon her, and she knew deep in her soul that the time for calculated revenge would come. Yet for now, patience was her weapon. Every move she made in the shadows strengthened her position, tightened her grip on power and forced the Ashfords into mistakes of their own. Her eyes wandered to the city beyond the hospital. The snow was gone, replaced by the bustling hum of life, businesses, deals, and opportunities all waiting to be seized. And Jessica realized something crucial. The girl who signed divorce papers in tears was gone. She was no longer a victim. She was a strategist, a leader, and a force to be reckoned with. By tomorrow, Jessica's first calculated strikes against the Ashfords would force James to notice her, and when that moment came, the reckoning would not just be about power, but about humiliation, justice, and a revenge decades in the making. The path to her ultimate rise into the billion-dollar empire awaiting her was only beginning.
Night had settled over the city, but Jessica felt no rest. The glow of monitors, the constant flow of reports, and the subtle tension in the hospital air made sleep impossible. The Ashfords had reacted to her moves from the previous day, but she had anticipated their counterattacks. Tonight, it was time to hit them where it hurt. Daniel, pale but focused, watched her from the bed. "They believe Blackridge is just a corporate asset," he said. "They don't know that a single move tonight could destabilize their entire operation and humiliate them personally." Jessica's eyes narrowed. For years, James had humiliated her publicly, confident she was powerless. The thought burned in her chest. They won't see this coming. Her plan was precise. A discreet financial maneuver, leveraging hidden assets Daniel had quietly maintained for years, combined with key communications that would redirect Ashford's partners to Blackridge's side. It was a high-stakes strike. One misstep, and she could trigger massive losses or expose herself. The first challenge came quickly. One of the Ashfords' lawyers had anticipated part of her plan, creating a temporary freeze on critical transfers. Jessica's pulse quickened. She pressed her hand to her stomach. Faint nausea reminded her of her vulnerability, but forced herself to focus. "Calm," Daniel whispered. "Think like them. Predict their reaction." Jessica inhaled, scanning the numbers, contracts, and communications. Every click of the keyboard, every approval, every subtle redirection felt like a chess move. Hours blurred as she orchestrated the plan, testing her patience, skill, and nerves. Then came the pivotal moment, a notification that the Ashfords' primary distributor had accepted Blackridge's revised offer. The ripple spread fast, partners aligning with her father's company. Jessica allowed herself a faint smile, but the work wasn't done. James Ashford had noticed. Jessica could feel the shift, the subtle tremor in the corporate network, the sudden hesitations in the missed deadlines. For the first time, James realized that the girl he had humiliated and discarded was not only capable, but dangerous. Daniel leaned close, voice low. "This is your first personal victory, Jessica, not just in business, but over the man who sought to break you. But remember, this is only the beginning. They will retaliate, and James, he will not forget." Jessica pressed her hand lightly to her stomach again, the subtle wave of nausea rising, but she ignored it. Tonight was about action, not vulnerability. The thrill of success mingled with a simmering determination. James would pay for the humiliation, not through brute force, but through the careful, deliberate unraveling of his assumptions about her. Hours passed. The city slept, oblivious to the silent war waging in the shadows. Jessica reviewed every outcome, double-checked every communication, and ensured that every move was airtight. Each success was a message. She was no longer the powerless girl from the Christmas party. She was a strategist, a threat, a force to be reckoned with. Finally, she leaned back in the chair, exhausted but exhilarated. Daniel's eyes were wet with pride. "You've done more than protect Blackridge. You've sent them a message they will remember, in fear."
James Ashford has no idea what is coming next. Jessica allowed herself a slow breath, her mind already racing ahead. This is just the beginning. She had tasted victory, and now she understood the intoxicating power of control, strategy, and subtle revenge. By morning, the Ashfords would scramble to respond, but Jessica would be ready. Every partner, every deal, and every move she had orchestrated had set the stage for a confrontation, not just with James, but with the family who had humiliated her. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the path to reclaiming her life and exacting justice was only getting sharper, darker, and more unstoppable.
The city was quiet, but Jessica could feel the tension vibrating through every report, message, and alert. The Ashfords had noticed her strike, and their retaliation was coming fast. This was no longer a test, it was a reckoning. Daniel's frail frame sat upright in the hospital bed, eyes sharp behind the fatigue. "They're striking back," he said, voice steady despite weakness. "A key partner is withdrawn, shipping routes are being sabotaged, and James, he's taking notice personally. He wants to intimidate you." Jessica's jaw tightened. Let him try. They think they can scare me? They're about to learn that the girl they humiliated is not afraid. Her words were firm, but her stomach churned faintly, a subtle reminder of the life growing inside her. She pressed a hand to it and took a deep breath. She couldn't afford distraction now, not when the empire, her father, and her own sense of justice hung in the balance. The first alert arrived within the hour. A key partner froze transactions under pressure from Ashford lawyers. Another notification. A shipment was delayed, threatening revenue streams. The Ashfords were ruthless, and the scale of retaliation was larger than Jessica had anticipated. She rose from the desk, pacing briefly to calm herself. "Daniel, we need to counteract fast. Every move they make now, we must anticipate and neutralize." He nodded. "Good. But remember, this is not just business. James Ashford is cruel. He'll try to humiliate you publicly again. You must act strategically, not emotionally." Jessica's mind raced. Strategy became instinct. She coordinated with lawyers, partners, and regional managers, issuing approvals and redirecting shipments in real time. Each decision was precise, calculated in high stakes. One slip, one miscalculation could tip the balance back to the Ashfords. Hours of tense maneuvering passed. At one point, a critical partner threatened to withdraw entirely. Jessica paused, heart hammering, and made a split-second decision. A discreet incentive combined with a legal clause ensured loyalty while keeping the Ashfords blind to the maneuver. By evening, the first tangible results appeared. Shipping delays were mitigated, partner banks reversed freezes, and the Ashfords' attempts to destabilize Blackridge were partially thwarted. But James's name lingered in every alert and email, a constant, invisible pressure. Daniel exhaled softly. "You've done well today, Jessica. They've tried to corner you, but you've held ground. And James, he knows now that you are no longer a victim." Jessica's hands pressed briefly to her stomach, a subtle ache reminding her of vulnerability. Yet she ignored it. Tonight was about survival, strategy, and proving herself, and she had done both. But victory was incomplete. The Ashfords were still maneuvering, adapting to her moves. Jessica knew this was only the beginning. The next steps had to be more calculated, more decisive, and more personal. James would be the ultimate challenge, not just as a corporate rival, but as the man who had humiliated her in front of the world. The city outside gleamed under streetlights, oblivious to the silent war being waged in the shadows. Jessica allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, knowing she had survived the first wave of retaliation, but the real reckoning was yet to come.
By morning, the Ashfords would regroup, and James would be forced to confront the reality that Jessica was no longer the powerless girl he had discarded. And when that confrontation came, it would be personal, strategic, and irreversible. A test of her courage, skill, and the growing power she had only begun to claim.
The sun had barely risen, casting pale light across the city, but Jessica was already at her command center in the hospital study. Every screen, report, and document laid before her was a tool, a weapon, and a pathway to her next move. Daniel watched her, weak but alert. "James is aware now," he said quietly. "He knows you've survived, that you've struck back, and that you're no longer the girl he humiliated. But awareness makes him dangerous. Every action from here on must be precise." Jessica's jaw tightened. "I've been precise so far. Now it's time to take control." The plan was daring. Using the hidden assets and strategic intelligence Daniel had cultivated over the years, Jessica would execute a coordinated move against the Ashfords' key operations, cutting off supply lines, redirecting critical contracts, and securing allies who had previously been swayed by Ashford influence. It was high risk, high reward, and personal. Her hands flew across the keyboard, issuing approvals, confirming redirections, and alerting loyal partners. Every click was calculated. Every decision carried consequences that could reshape the balance of power between Blackridge and Ashford Enterprises. Mid-morning, a sudden alert flashed on her screen. An Ashford partner had attempted to sabotage a shipment. Jessica's pulse quickened. She pressed a hand to her stomach. A subtle, familiar ache reminded her of vulnerability, but she refused to pause. "No hesitation, not now." Daniel nodded. "Remember, Jessica, this is not just strategy. This is personal. James humiliated you, but now you can turn the tables without being reckless. Use your mind, not anger." Jessica smiled faintly. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but strategy ruled her actions. She executed a clever legal loophole, securing the shipment while exposing Ashford's misstep to neutral partners. The effect was immediate. Ashford influence faltered, and Blackridge's stability grew stronger by the hour. By late afternoon, the results were undeniable. Key contracts had been secured, shipments stabilized, and Ashford's attempts to regain ground were thwarted. But more importantly, James Ashford himself had taken notice. Reports indicated he was personally monitoring Blackridge activity, realizing for the first time that Jessica was a direct, formidable threat. Daniel exhaled softly, pride and relief mixing in his frail face. "You've done more than stabilize the company. You've begun to shape the game entirely in your favor. James, he won't recover from this easily." Jessica leaned back, her mind racing. The girl who had signed divorce papers in tears was gone. The woman who orchestrated this complex offensive felt powerful, calculated, and unstoppable. Yet even in triumph, subtle reminders of her humanity surfaced. A wave of nausea passed again, a faint ache pressing at her stomach. She pressed her hand there, forcing herself to focus. The new life growing inside her would soon demand attention, but for now the empire required every ounce of her skill and resolve. Her eyes drifted to Daniel, lying frail but determined. "I'll protect everything you've built, and I'll make sure James Ashford never forgets what he did to me." Daniel smiled weakly, pride softening his features. "You've begun the path to reclaiming everything, but remember, this is only the beginning. The game isn't over, not yet, and James, he will try to strike back, personally."
Jessica's gaze hardened, a spark of cold determination flaring. Let him try. He'll see that the powerless girl he humiliated is gone, replaced by someone he cannot touch, not with money, not with influence, not with cruelty. By nightfall, the Ashfords would be forced to react, and James himself would finally be confronted with the woman he once discarded. Every move Jessica made tonight set the stage for a personal reckoning, a corporate upheaval, and the beginning of her ultimate transformation, from a powerless girl to the heir of a billion-dollar empire, poised to reclaim what was stolen from her.
The evening skyline shimmered with a cold, unyielding brilliance, mirroring the tension in Jessica's heart. Every step she took toward the Ashford headquarters was deliberate, measured, and filled with a simmering determination that had been years in the making. Tonight, she would face James, not as the powerless girl he had humiliated, but as a woman armed with strategy, authority, and the weight of a billion-dollar empire. Daniel's weak voice echoed in her mind, though he rested in the hospital bed miles away. Remember, Jessica, this is not just about revenge. It's about justice and reclaiming everything that was stolen from you. Be precise, be calm, and above all, be unshakable. Jessica's hand tightened around the folder she carried. Contracts, evidence, and strategic documents she had orchestrated to corner the Ashfords. Every piece had been prepared meticulously, ensuring that tonight's confrontation would not just humiliate James, but make him powerless to retaliate. As she entered the towering Ashford building, her eyes met the security personnel, who gave subtle nods. Her presence was authorized, yet a deliberate tension lingered in the air. She moved past the lobby, past the opulent halls that once symbolized her oppression, and into the private office where James awaited. He rose slowly, a smug, condescending smile on his face. "Jessica," he said, voice laced with mockery, "I didn't expect to see you here. Still the same girl, I imagine." Jessica's lips pressed into a controlled smile. "The girl you humiliated no longer exists, James," she replied, her voice calm but cold. "Tonight, you're meeting someone else entirely." He laughed softly, incredulous. "You? What can you possibly do?" With deliberate motion, Jessica laid the folder on his polished desk. "Everything you thought you controlled," she said. "Your partners, your shipments, your contracts, they're all realigned. Every move you thought would humiliate me has been turned against you." James' eyes narrowed as he scanned the documents. Realization flickered, quickly replaced with shock. How did you—" Jessica interrupted softly. "I learned from my father, from every humiliation, every challenge, every moment you and your mother thought I was weak. I've turned your cruelty into strategy, your power into opportunity, and your arrogance into exposure." The office was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. James stood frozen, the weight of his underestimation crashing down. For the first time, he felt powerless. Jessica's hands brushed her stomach lightly, a subtle human moment, but she ignored it, fully focused on the confrontation at hand. "This is your reckoning, James. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with precision, authority, and the reality that I am no longer powerless." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Every move, every maneuver, every advantage he thought he had was now in her hands. Jessica's transformation was complete. She had orchestrated her first direct confrontation, turned the tables, and established herself as the rightful heir to her father's empire. Daniel's words echoed faintly in her mind. "You are unshakable.
And she was. By tomorrow, James Ashford would be forced to acknowledge her authority, her power, and the unstoppable force she had become. Jessica had claimed the first victory in her ultimate rise, not just as a strategist, but as the heir to a billion-dollar empire, poised to rebuild her life, protect her father's legacy, and finally claim every ounce of respect, dignity, and justice that had once been denied to her.
The morning sun poured through the windows of her father's private office, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Jessica sat at the head of the boardroom table, a commanding presence that had been unthinkable only weeks ago. The empire was hers to steer, every detail under her watchful eye. Daniel, frail but glowing with pride, leaned back in his chair, a faint smile touching his lips. "You've done more than survive, Jessica. You've rebuilt everything I worked for and more. The Ashfords will never underestimate you again." Jessica allowed herself a quiet moment of satisfaction. Black Ridge Logistics was stable, key partners were loyal, and every misstep by Ashford Enterprises had been neutralized or turned to her advantage. The city, the networks, the deals, everything she touched now bore the mark of her intelligence, strategy, and authority. But power alone was not enough. Her mind wandered briefly to the new life growing inside her, a subtle, steady reminder of vulnerability and hope. She pressed a hand to her stomach, a quiet smile forming. "I am building not just an empire, but a future." The morning was filled with meetings. Executives, lawyers, and managers came forward, each acknowledging her decisiveness, clarity, and the foresight she had brought to every decision. The Ashfords' failed maneuvers had created trust and loyalty in unexpected places, allies shifting toward her side, and Jessica moved with calculated grace to solidify her position. A discreet alert popped up on her screen. James Ashford, a direct message. She opened it carefully. "You've outplayed me, but this isn't over." Jessica smiled faintly, the cold edge of satisfaction cutting through her chest. He had finally recognized her, but the girl he had humiliated was gone. The woman he now faced was untouchable. Every insult, every sneer, every public humiliation had become fuel for her strategy, and James now stood on the losing side of her carefully constructed game. Daniel's voice interrupted her reflection. "Remember, Jessica, strength comes not just from victory, but from foresight. Keep building, consolidating, and learning. The Ashfords are dangerous, but now they fear you, and fear is a powerful ally." Jessica nodded, shifting her focus to the finer details, investments, expansions, and plans to integrate her father's legacy fully into her hands. Every decision, every signature, every strategy reinforced her position, ensuring that her father's empire and her future was secure. By midday, she convened a private meeting with her closest advisors. "We're not just protecting Black Ridge," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "We're expanding. Every partner, every resource, every opportunity will be aligned with us, and anyone who tries to undermine this empire will learn that the girl they humiliated is now untouchable." The team nodded, energized by her clarity and determination. Even in her subtle physical discomfort, she exuded authority. Pregnancy, exhaustion, and human vulnerability did not weaken her. They became the quiet markers of resilience. As evening approached, Jessica walked through her father's estate, looking out over the city. The skyline glimmered, reflecting her triumphs, her struggles, and the battles that had forged her into the woman she had become. Every humiliation, every tear, every obstacle had been transformed into strategy, power, and authority. A discreet notification reminded her of the final piece.
legal documents transferring ownership of all her father's assets, companies, and mansions directly to her name. The moment she signed, her status as the sole heir and billionaire would be official. Her hand hovered over the pen briefly, taking in the journey that had led her here. From the girl signing divorce papers in tears to the woman who now commanded loyalty, respect, and unimaginable power, the transformation was complete. She signed. The empire was hers. With Black Ridge consolidated, James humbled, and her father's legacy secured, Jessica's journey was far from over. A new chapter awaited, one where she could embrace motherhood, power, and the ultimate life she had been denied. The Ashfords had been taught a lesson they would never forget, but the story of Jessica Wellington, the girl who became a billionaire, was only just beginning.
The morning sun spilled through the large windows of the Wellington estate, warming the room in golden light. Jessica sat quietly, her hands resting gently on her growing belly. The subtle movement reminded her that she carried not just life, but hope for the future, a future she had fought, strategized, and clawed her way toward. Daniel, frail but smiling, watched her from the side, pride softening his features. "You've done more than build an empire, Jessica. You've secured the legacy, protected the company, and even, I dare say, taught the Ashfords a lesson they'll never forget." Jessica chuckled softly, a sound tinged with relief and determination. "They never saw it coming," she said. "Every move I made was calculated. Every insult, every humiliation, it became my strategy. And now they're powerless." Yet, as much as she relished her victory, new responsibilities weighed on her. Every decision, every meeting, every strategic expansion had to be balanced with the life she was nurturing inside. The pregnancy was progressing, sometimes exhausting, sometimes tender, but she welcomed the reminder that her power extended beyond business. She spent the day reviewing company expansions, meeting with loyal partners, and signing agreements that secured her father's empire even further. Every move reinforced her authority, ensuring that James Ashford and his family could no longer influence or challenge her. A subtle notification caught her attention, a minor disruption in one of Ashford's remaining investments. She smiled faintly. Even in retreat, the Ashfords were flailing. Her influence had spread beyond Black Ridge. The ripple of her strategic brilliance was visible across the corporate world. Later that evening, she walked through the estate pardons, a calm breeze brushing her face. Her hand rested on her belly, the faint stir of life inside, a quiet reassurance that she was building more than an empire. She was building a family. Daniel's voice broke the silence. "You've done remarkably well, Jessica. But remember, power is more than strategy. It's patience, it's foresight, and it's knowing when to act and when to nurture." She nodded. Every lesson, every humiliation, every challenge had taught her not only to dominate in business, but to navigate life with grace and vision. She was no longer the girl James Ashford had discarded in tears. She was a mother-to-be, a strategist, and a billionaire in her own right. The subtle ache in her stomach reminded her of the balance she now carried. Human vulnerability intertwined with absolute authority. She welcomed it. The future, with her child, her empire, and her reclaimed dignity, was hers to shape. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of amber and violet, Jessica allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had won the battles that mattered, her father's legacy secured, James humbled, Black Ridge thriving, and now a new chapter awaited, one where motherhood and mastery could coexist, where the girl who had cried in humiliation was fully transformed into a woman who commanded respect, loyalty,
and life itself. In the months to come, Jessica would face subtle challenges, both corporate and personal. But with her child growing inside her, her father's legacy fully secured, and her power undisputed, she would navigate them all with a skill and confidence that no one, not even James Ashford, could challenge. The story of Jessica Wellington, mother, billionaire, and strategist, was entering its ultimate chapter.
The estate was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of early morning sunlight. Jessica stood at the balcony, cradling her newborn son, William, in her arms. The tiny, perfect weight of him against her chest was a reminder of everything she had fought for: her father's legacy, her own dignity, and the life she had reclaimed from the cruelty of the Ashfords. Daniel, now weaker but smiling, with tears in his eyes, sat nearby. "He's perfect, Jessica, just like you." She kissed her son's forehead gently, a smile tugging at her lips. "He's more than perfect, Dad. He's our future, and he will grow up knowing that his mother never backed down, never allowed injustice to dictate her life, and reclaimed everything that was taken from us." The city outside glittered in the early morning light, a reflection of the empire Jessica now commanded. Black Ridge was thriving, its partners loyal, its influence expanding, and the Ashfords, once arrogant, once cruel, had been humbled completely. Reports indicated that James's company was now mired in debt, his attempts to regain ground futile. For the first time, he felt the consequences of underestimating someone he had discarded. Jessica's hand tightened on William's blanket. A faint ache from recent weeks reminded her of her strength and vulnerability intertwined. She had learned to balance both, the tender care of her child and the sharp acumen of a billionaire strategist. A subtle alert appeared on her screen, a news headline announcing Ashford Enterprises' financial struggles. She smiled faintly, a quiet satisfaction welling within her. James and Olivia had been forced to confront their failures, powerless to harm her or the empire she had built. Daniel's gaze softened. "You've done it, Jessica. You've not only reclaimed your life, but expanded it beyond what I ever imagined. Black Ridge is secure, William is safe, and the Ashfords have learned their lesson." Jessica looked down at her son, heart full. "And this is just the beginning, Dad. He'll grow up surrounded by strength, love, and lessons we've learned the hard way. He'll know the power of resilience and that injustice can always be overcome." The doorbell rang softly. Jessica set William down gently in his crib and walked to the entrance. A courier delivered a package, legal documents confirming the complete consolidation of all her father's assets under her name. She signed them with calm authority, the final act solidifying her billionaire status, her control, and her independence. Later, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of amber and gold, Jessica held William again, rocking him gently. Her mind wandered briefly to the past, the Christmas party humiliation, the divorce papers thrown in her face, the public mockery, the tears she had shed. Every memory was now a stone in the foundation of her empire, every insult a lesson turned into strategy. She whispered softly to William, "This is our world now, baby, and it's one we built together, with courage, strategy, and love." The Ashfords, now distant and powerless, had no choice but to witness the rise of a woman they once tried to destroy. And in that quiet triumph, Jessica understood a truth she had learned over years of struggle. Real power is not just wealth or authority, it is resilience, intelligence,
and the courage to reclaim what is yours, no matter the obstacles. As night fell, the estate shimmered like a beacon of victory. Jessica Wellington, the girl who had signed divorce papers in tears, the woman who had endured humiliation, and now the mother, billionaire, and strategist had claimed her life completely. Life had come full circle. James Ashford was humbled, Black Ridge's empire was unshakable, and her family legacy secured. Yet, the ultimate victory was personal. Jessica had reclaimed her dignity, embraced motherhood, and built a life that no cruelty could ever threaten again. The girl who had once cried alone at Christmas had become a force that would never be ignored, and a legacy that would endure for generations.
25 years had passed, and the city had changed, but one thing remained constant. The name Wellington carried power, respect, and unshakable authority. Jessica stood at the entrance of an old age home, holding her grown son William's hand. The crowd around them was soft-spoken but warm, a ceremony of remembrance for the elderly residents who'd lived full lives. William, now a young man with the same determination in his eyes that Jessica had once possessed, whispered, "Mom, is this really necessary?" Jessica smiled, the memories flooding back, the tears, the humiliation, the battles she had fought to reclaim her life in her father's legacy. "Some lessons need to be remembered, William," she said quietly. "Some people need to see that their cruelty cannot define the lives of those they tried to destroy." And there he was, James Ashford, older, thinner, and far humbler than the arrogant man who had once thrown divorce papers in her face. His eyes widened when he saw Jessica, but there was no triumph, no arrogance, only the heavy weight of regret. He approached slowly, every step betraying hesitation. "Jessica," he began, but she didn't interrupt. There was no need. Years of consequences had spoken louder than words ever could. Her gaze was steady, unwavering. "James," she said softly, "Kudrat ne jo tumhe sabak diya, wo main kabhi nahi de sakti thi." He swallowed hard, realizing that the girl he had humiliated, mocked, and discarded had not only survived, but thrived beyond his comprehension. The empires he had clung to were crumbling, his family humiliated, and the woman he once underestimated had become a legend in her own right. William squeezed her hand gently, pride gleaming in his eyes. Jessica bent down, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's time to focus on what truly matters," she whispered to him. "Family, legacy, and life worth living." The Ashfords shuffled away, powerless, humbled, and aware that their arrogance and cruelty had cost them everything. Jessica's empire was unassailable, her legacy secured, and her life, once marked by humiliation, was now defined by resilience, strategy, and love. Later, Jessica returned home, the sunset casting golden light across the Wellington estate. She carried William inside, pausing to glance at the skyline, the city they had shaped, protected, and ruled. Every challenge, every tear, every loss had led to this moment of triumph. She settled into her study, the familiar weight of responsibility comforting rather than oppressive. Black Ridge logistics thrived. William was prepared to inherit not just wealth, but wisdom, and her father's legacy lived on in her hands. But most importantly, she had reclaimed herself, her dignity, her power, and her future. Jessica whispered softly to herself, a smile touching her lips. "From tears at Christmas to a life unshakable. We did it, William. We survived. We rose. And nothing, not James, not anyone, can take this away."
In that moment, the world outside could continue its bustle. The Ashfords' shadows had faded, and the girl who had once been powerless had become an unstoppable force. Mother, strategist, billionaire, the legacy of Jessica Wellington was eternal. The story came full circle. Humiliation had turned into power, cruelty into strategy, and loss into legacy. Jessica had reclaimed her life, embraced motherhood, and established an empire that would endure through generations. James Ashford, the symbol of past pain, was left with nothing but lessons learned too late. And for Jessica, the future was bright, unshakable, and hers entirely.